to meet you. Mohamed. Nice to meet you. Mohamed.
Enchanté. Bonjour. Bonjour.
Enchanté.
Each team has 20 minutes to present its case to the judge. I will hold up the cards for the last 10, 5, and 2 minutes, as well as for the last 30 seconds of the presentation. During the last 10 seconds, I will indicate with my fingers the numbers of seconds remaining. If you have not finished your presentation after 20 minutes, you will be stopped in order to proceed with the Q&A period. A Q&A period of a maximum of 5 minutes is allocated to the jury at the end of your presentation. Please note that at any time you cannot say or reference the name or the location of your university.
Picture this. It's your dream car. The car you've always wanted. The make you thought you'd never have. You walk up to it, pull the car door open, and get this whiff of new car smell. You sit into it, put your hands around the steering wheel, and it feels just right. You put your key into the ignition, turn the ignition, but nothing happens. You pop the hood, open it, and realize there's no engine. Without a core, without an engine, you can't go anywhere. Project management is the core of any project. It allows you to get from point A to point B. Hello, Yellow Page Group. My name is Gabriella, and we are here from Resourceful Global Minds. I am joined by Rose and Mo. Today we're going to be talking about the importance of project management within Yellow Pages Group. We're going to be going over a quick overview, a strategy analysis, an IT analysis, finally a recommendation and an implementation.
Merci. On va commencer avec un survol de votre situation actuelle. Donc, vous avez une culture innovatrice au sein de votre organisation. Ça vous permet de vraiment avoir un gros part de marché dans l'industrie. Vous êtes constamment en train d'évoluer, c'est excellent. Par contre, il y a des problèmes avec la gestion du projet, avec votre projet actuel, Yellow API. On est présentement une semaine en retard, puis on commence à avoir des petits problèmes qui viennent s'apparaître. Il y a aussi, comme vous pouvez voir, l'acceptation interne du projet n'est pas si bon que ça. C'est-à-dire le département du marketing, ils ne comprennent pas exactement c'est quoi le but du projet. Il faut vraiment les éduquer sur ça. On va maintenant vous présenter une matrice d'importance urgence. Fait que ça, c'est vraiment les aspects qui sont vraiment importants à vraiment considérer. Avant tout, on va commencer dans le haut à droite. Fait que ça, c'est vraiment les issues qui sont urgents et importants. Alors, pour commencer, résistance au changement, comme j'ai dit, vraiment dans le département du marketing, puis vraiment au sein de l'entreprise aussi. Il y a aussi, ils ont peur aussi d'avoir la dilution de valeur de l'information. Alors, si on va donner un accès gratuit à l'information dans le Yellow API, ils ont peur qu'on va vraiment perdre la valeur de cette information comme ça. Aussi, il faut contrôler les coûts, l'échéancier et l'étendue du projet. Donc, ça, c'est très important aussi. Après qu'on a réglé ces problèmes-là, on va concentrer vraiment sur la sécurité de l'information, parce que c'est une autre problème qu'on a eu. Puis aussi le retour sur l'investissement, alors le 35% de trafic sur le site web. Maintenant, on va procéder avec notre analyse, mais avant ça, on va faire notre mandat. So our mandate today would be to develop a strategy to allow Yellow API to be the project to be on time, on schedule, and within scope, by ensuring internal buy-in, of course, and the acceptance of the sharing of the Yellow API data. So now on to the analysis by Gabriella.
So we're going to do an internal and external analysis. So currently, Yellow Pages is very strong. They really have this ability to know that there was a digital era coming on, and they went ahead and they started with this, moving from these paper books and going on to the digital frontier, which was great. That put you ahead. Also, one of your best assets is actually your information, the content that you have. There are, however, some challenges that are faced by your organization. So Yellow API has already delayed, as Rose mentioned, by 1 week. This is probably not the best start, and we really need to get this out by November. There is resistance to change within marketing. They need to see the value of this organization and what this project can do. And there's no real change agents available right now. for 2 months, there's nobody that's going to be available to champion this project, to really say, this is why this is necessary and required. There are some opportunities, however. You have 1.5 million of subscribers that are, actually ready or good for you to use at your disposal. And generating more traffic to your current sites is also an opportunity. You want to go ahead and do this, but there are some threats. So you need to watch out for that increased competition. There is competition out there, and it can come and swoop in on you at any point. So where are we currently? So as I said, there is this kind of lack of internal acceptance, and there is this risk of dilution of data that is upon your organization, and there's a project delay. Where we want to see this go is we want to see this acceptance of Yellow API. We want to know that everybody internally accepts the project. And of course, we want to maintain data integrity, because this could be very key and very bad for your organization. And finally, we want to ensure that it remains on time, on budget, at all costs, and on schedule. And we want to do this by ensuring that employees are empowered, there is a change management process put in place, and there is monitoring of that project from start to end. So something that's important in IT is to have early successes. So you have goals that are set at the beginning, but they have a smaller payoff. And then you have glittering prizes, and those glittering prizes is this Yellow API project. If it's well implemented and it's well used, you'll be able to have a large payoff in the near future.
Okay, so now to further analyze the case, we will be looking at the benefits for the developers. Now the developers, it's very important to have a buy-in from them. So the first benefit currently Yellow Pages is providing is free access, meaning they're paying $0 to have an access to a platform that serves 16 million people 16 million people just for listings on their site, plus the 1.5 million listings for only businesses. The second point to bring up here is actually to pay developers for traffic they're generating. So by them taking the application programming interface and putting it on apps that exist for their iPhones, tablets, etc., we're generating more traffic, and we're paying them for traffic to keep them interested and keep innovating on the API platform for Yellow Pages. Now, the third point here is to offer a unique support to these developers. If you have a question, we can have a live chat as well to answer these questions, or if you can have very well documentation that answers any of their questions, whether technical or business objectives. And the fourth point to bring here is up-to-date content of businesses. Yellow Pages keep their content up to date daily, meaning developers have access to a platform where business addresses, business information is up to date daily. The last point here is data security and integrity. Developers always take on contracts, whether it be from other companies, so you have to keep in mind the security. Yellow Pages is actually taking the headache by providing this API from the developers. I'll now leave you with Gabby to discuss the status quo versus competitive advantage.
So there's some importance. Within your organization, employees are not seeing these benefits. And there are some benefits. And there are, of course, some things that we need to take into consideration. So we need to build a community for developers, and we need to provide value to the existing businesses. But what does that mean? So you currently have a lot of businesses that are signed up with Yellow Pages that are using your services. And if you leverage this Yellow API, you can have them extend over all of these other businesses that are going to be using it, telling them, we can provide added marketing for you, we can provide added services to you by leveraging this Yellow API. Now, there is this fear of data dilution and traffic reduction, but we need to see it in a different light, that we can provide something of more added value to them.
So before moving any further, and before going on to our recommendation, I'd first just like to point out some of the differences between the current waterfall methodology that you're using for your API development, and I'm going to compare that to another methodology, which is the Agile methodology. So currently, the waterfall methodology, there's a great lack of flexibility. It's very difficult to go back and make different iterations, because once something's done, it's pretty hard to go back. So now, there's also a lot of formalized documentation, so it does take a bit more time to be able to actually implement the actual API. Modifying the scope is tied to the first point I had mentioned about the flexibility, so it's hard to actually change the requirements of the project once it's already begun. And finally, longer development cycles also exist with this methodology. So if we compare that to an agile methodology, there's a lot more flexibility. So you can go back and make iterations and change with respect to the requirements of the end user and some of the developers as well. There's still documentation that goes on with agile methodology, of course, but it's more informal and it's a lot less bureaucratic, takes less time. Again, ease of iterations, of course, is something that's great for the agile methodology. Also, the short cycles, so these sprints, you're meeting up often, and there's a lot of communication that's occurring between the individuals who are actually developing the API. So increased communication throughout the entire process, which leads us now to our recommendation, which is to utilize an agile methodology for the development of Yellow API, while appointing a change champion and implementing a full-out marketing campaign.
So how did we arrive at this recommendation? We took into consideration the triple constraint, which is cost, time, and of course, project range. And at this, we were able to say that our recommendation, once again, is to have an agile methodology in place, but while also putting forward some kind of change management project with a marketing strategy. I'll now allow Mo to continue with our implementation.
So, for the implementation strategy, based on the analysis and recommendations set forth by myself and my colleagues, we arrived at 2 stages or components that are part of this implementation. The first one is a marketing strategy, and the second one is an agile methodology. So let's explore the marketing strategy. What we will be implementing here is we will further take the hackathon and the Hackfest events that currently Yellow Pages sponsor, and take it a step further by having it across cities all over the country. Because at these events, developers sit down and experiment with the APIs. And from previous experience as consultants as well, we can tell you that these hackathons produce amazing apps and amazing features used later on in marketing strategies. The second point to bring here is we want to create a marketing campaign with a pool fund. It can be a pool of, let's assume, $100,000. And we will tell developers, here's your chance to launch a business, use a platform like a Yellow API, and experiment with it. And if it's successful, generating enough traffic, we can set that traffic, assuming it's 10,000 hits per month as visits to the app, with a click-through rate, let's assume, of 10%, and a conversion and bounce rate, a very high conversion rate with a very low bounce rate. You will win, for instance, $100,000. The third thing to implement here is the integrate with existing content management systems. As you know, there's a lot of content management systems currently. You have WordPress, you have Joomla, you have Expression Engine out there. By having a module that actually integrates to these content management systems with one click installs, it's actually very amazing for the developers, because instantly they can integrate the Yellow API features into any website that they would like to develop. So now, moving into the agile, basically, stage. So what we are looking at implementing here, as you can see, looking first at the presentation layer, the application layer, and the data layer. So this is currently your architecture at Yellow Pages. In the presentation layer, that's where the access comes in. That's where people access the devices, whether it be from mobile phones, etc. So by having the Yellow API, it's actually getting more traffic into Yellow Pages, because there's different platforms accessing the site. So focusing on that is good. Application layer, Yellow API plus the business logic. That's where basically the current application layer falls in. And in there, there's a dynamic data about local businesses, and there's actually an increase of YPG client visibility. The last thing to mention here is the data layer, and that's where you have the 16 million hits to the database with 1.5 million basically subscribers. And now move into the next stage, which is the Scrum Agile methodology. Why did we choose the Scrum? The Scrum has proven to be a very good Agile methodology in the development of software. So what we are looking at first stage is basically have a feature pool, meaning any features we want to introduce to the API, it will be researched first by having, as you can see, developers' feedback forms on basically the Yellow Pages API website. By having a list of feature pools that they recommend to us, we can then take that and move into the second stage, which is the prioritization of these basically features. And in the prioritization stage, we say to the developers, you can rate certain things or features introduced, and based on the high ratings, we can prioritize them and launch them. Now, the last stage is actual Scrum process. So how Scrum works is you have sprints followed by stories. So we'll keep the sprints very short. It's going to be 2 sprints, assuming from 1 to 2 weeks for each sprint. And in the sprint, we're going to have about 6 stories. With the 6 stories, once they're done, we can launch that sprint and move on to the second sprint. So we're recommending having 2 sprints, 1 to 2 weeks. And by the end of the second sprint, we're going to have QA testing and end user feedback, which is very important before we actually do the release. And just keep in mind that also documentation and beta testing by the developers have to be done at the end. Testing is always important, and the documentation produced once the features are confirmed. So what also we are recommending is as well a dashboard for the developers. As you know, developers have lots of basically apps that they will be actually using the API to produce. So let's have a dashboard for these developers where they can see all their apps in one place, see what is their total traffic in terms of impressions, what is the click-through rate, etc. So having a dashboard is invaluable. It's very valuable for these developers to actually have. And Rose will leave you now with change management.
So change management is key to this organization. The employees are the engine to your car, and without them, we're not going to go anywhere. So change management is extremely important for ensuring long-term success and acceptance of the Yellow API project. So we've broken it down into 2 phases, the planning stage and the implementation phase. So for the planning stage, you need to be able to effectively communicate the vision and strategy. We do know that you have change management specialists on staff, however, they won't be available for 2 months. So that's a great period of time considering the length of this project is only 10 months. So what we want to do actually is bring in a change champion that actually works within the organization. So Mr. Alal, which is the senior analyst at the organization, he's going to be the motivator. He's open, he's flexible, and he understands agile methodology as well, which is great. So he'll be the motivator of the organization. And then we want to go on to clarify the tasks and roles and make sure that everyone knows what the specific logic is for the tasks. Now for the important stage of the implementation. This is the communication phase. This is where we're going to be letting the marketing department know of the benefits of this recommendation, why using agile methodology is great, on top of the fact that we're going to be actually implementing the Yellow API. So education is key here, but we also want to train the current staff. So Monsieur Odette, which is one of the main employees, he's very reluctant to accept technology and new ways of doing things. He's very stuck on the waterfall methodology. So we want to educate him on the benefits of agile. And finally, ACT is when we want to actually implement the strategy.
So now let's move into the contingency plan. Of course, we've recommended a lot, but there are some key risks that we need to look at. So first is this developer's buy-in. But this has really been addressed by this dashboard that we're creating. Mo has said that this dashboard will help the developers feel more at ease and more willing, hopefully, to take on this new Yellow API. Now, the severity is high, and the likelihood is medium. So if we pitch this correctly and we use this marketing strategy to get in there, we can mitigate this risk. There's internal buy-in, of course. And that's medium. We have this change management. It's going to also bring in, this hope that the consumers, the people within our organization are willing to do this. And finally, there is, the triple constraint. And if that's not met, we have a huge issue. We need to make sure that we are on time and on budget. Agile methodology allows one to do this. In the Agile methodology, we're constantly having an iterative process going back and forth between the end user and, of course, us. And being able to do that allows you to have a product that is, or a service that is well tailored to the consumer. And finally, we suggest that all of this will be implemented quite quickly. The project lifecycle, this needs to be put out within 10 months. So we don't have a lot of time to go ahead and do this. So we're hoping that within 1 month, we will get this over with.
Exactly, and the implementation of the change management will be occurring right now. It'll be ongoing. So really get people on board for what's to come in the future for this Yellow API app when it's going to be rolled out.
So now, we've gone ahead and we've told you all about our plans and our strategy for your organization. We've taken you through from the point A all the way to point B. We've ensured that you've learned everything, that you are able to really, take this into your own hands. So now we want you to take those keys to that brand new car, put it into the ignition, turn the key, and drive on and see what's on your horizon. Thank you.
Okay, so in your assessment, you noted that your main threat for this project would be the competition. So in this case, can you tell us how we can beat the competition? What would be your strategy so that we can face the competition?
Of course. So one of our main strategies to beat this competition is to really get this out on point and on target. If there is no internal problems with this and internally everyone understands and this works properly with the Agile methodology and really seeing what end users are responding to, we can ensure that this will be used by everyone and that this will beat the competition just because it's well known, it's prominent in everyone's mind. And so along with the marketing strategy, we can ensure that this is done properly.
Okay, and also in your strategy for the buy-in to get marketing on board with the project, you mentioned that you would want them to understand the positive aspects of an Agile methodology. What would be your way to evaluate the success of the change from Waterfall to Agile? So in other words, the KPIs that you would use to evaluate the success of this change?
Yeah, actually, great question. In the waterfall, it's a very traditional method as opposed to agile. With the traditional method, you have a lot of kind of we call it jargon involved as well. Meaning documentation is really, for instance, taking too long, etc., to produce, which for instance, technical writers at the organization can get discouraged. While with, for instance, an agile methodology, you can have, like for instance, right now Yellow Pages have 4 programmers. One of these programmers can become the QA and basically the documentation person responsible for that. So encouraging basically short sprints, for instance, gives them basically more motivation that they finish something quicker than waiting for instance, a year or 2 years to produce something with the waterfall. So their buy-in can be bought by having short sprints, them seeing stuff actually going out and released and being used as well.
So clearly one of the issue in this case is the marketing department resistance to the new approach, to the public API. They understand the concept, but yet they believe that this will lead to a dilution of the value of the data. How would you convince them, like specifically, how would you convince them that this is the right approach? Or another way of saying it is, how would you measure the success of this project from a perspective of dilution of the value of the data versus increased traffic generated by the open API?
Again, great question. What we are actually, as we've indicated as well, what we were looking at implementing is by having an open data, basically even though we're diluting our data and we're allowing open access to it, the business value coming in will be higher, because this is how we're going to actually market it exactly to businesses. Right now, Yellow Pages has 1.5 million business listings, and these business listings are paid for. And currently, we are only offering search engine optimization and SEM services by also saying your listing will be accessed by API developers, maybe around the world, even to develop other applications where your business will actually show up on these sites. So, for instance, if we take Reserverly, which used, for instance, Yellow Pages app or API to produce reservations for maybe local hotels and restaurants, etc. So by selling the idea that businesses can actually businesses sign up for the ABI would actually benefit from the open access ABI. So to the marketing department, all we're going to be saying is we have 1.5 million businesses right now signed up. We want to offer them that extra feature where they will be exposed to different platforms and different applications through the API. So that actually outweighs the risk of the dilution of the data. That's exactly what the marketing department is looking for, is being exposed more to other applications and markets.
Right now, there's a lack of participation of the marketing department into the project. Yet, you suggest to use an agile methodology, which typically requires even more participation from the business side in order to be successful. How are you going to address this? Like the lack of participation right now from where it is to actually a greater level of participation that is required by the methodology?
I'm